when you conjure up the image of a legendary figure like Cole Porter, there is a very specific, almost cinematic mythology that instantly plays in your head.
Oh, absolutely. The impeccable white tie tuxedo.
Right, the tuxedo. You picture the grand piano, the cigarette holder, the champagne glass catching the light at some impossibly glamorous party in Paris.
Or penthouse in New York.
Exactly. The image we've been handed over the decades is of a life that was completely polished, just fiercely public and, well, entirely effortless.
Yeah, it was a brand of pure, unadulterated sophistication.
It really was. But that level of flawless curation always comes at a cost, and it usually serves to hide something far more complex.
It was an armor made of wit and melody. He cultivated that image with a precision that was almost, military.
Right.
The public saw exactly what he wanted them to see. The ultimate urbane sophisticate who could rhyme Colosseum with Louvre Museum without even breaking a sweat.
Which is just brilliant. But anyway, welcome to episode 56 of the podcast called Porter-Pedia, the podcast dedicated to exploring the life, the times, and the timeless work of the one and only Cole Porter.
Thrilled to be here, as always.
And I am so thrilled you, the listener, are joining us today, because this week's episode explores a topic that was absolutely, unequivocally never meant to see the light of day.
No, it really wasn't.
We are looking behind the tuxedo and the champagne to examine the secret lovers Cole Porter took while he was married to his wife, Linda.
Yeah, to really understand the man, and especially to understand the deep, aching resonance of his music, we have to examine this intensely hidden history.
We do. And we're looking at an array of surviving materials for this. We've got biographical research, historical context, and most importantly, his own surviving correspondence.
Right. Specifically, we're pulling from the collections like the Letters of Cole Porter and the Cole Porter Companion.
Exactly. But before we get into the substance of those letters, there is this massive historical caveat we really need to establish.
All right, this is crucial. The vast majority of Porter's love letters, they just no longer exist.
Yeah.
They were systematically and purposefully destroyed to protect his legacy.
That is just such a staggering thought to me. It's like, imagine trying to understand a massive, sweeping mosaic when someone has taken a hammer to it.
Right. And you only have a handful of the tiles left.
Exactly. We are looking at a partial reconstruction of his same-sex relationships here. We're piecing together this incredibly complex pattern from the fragments that somehow avoided the fire.
But those fragments, they are breathtaking.
They really are. And if you have ever listened to a Cole Porter song, if you've ever heard those lyrics and felt that bruised, desperate longing hiding just beneath that cool champagne-soaked wit today, you are going to find out exactly where that longing came from. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So let's start with the sociology of his existence. To understand this hidden life, we really have to grasp the central paradox of Cole Porter's world.
Which is?
Well, his homosexuality wasn't a total secret. Yeah, in his specific inner circle, it was an open reality. But it was impeccably managed. It was highly coded.
So it wasn't about being invisible.
Exactly. The primary defense mechanism he used to protect himself wasn't invisibility at all. It was immense wealth and unassailable social status.
That is fascinating. There's this brilliant quote from the historical material that perfectly captures this dynamic. The sources say, "Class is what you display, sex is what you hide."
Yes. That sums it up perfectly.
I keep turning that over in my mind. It makes me think of like a master illusionist's misdirection.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's like an architect who builds this magnificent, glittering fortress to impress the entire world. But the fortress is actually a labyrinth designed to hide one specific room in the very center.
Right, the misdirection.
Yeah. He's basically saying, look at my glamorous marriage to this beautiful, wealthy woman. Look at our transatlantic ocean liner trips. Look at the dazzling parties we throw in Venice.
So you don't look at the private bedroom.
Exactly. He dazzled the press so thoroughly that they never thought to look in the shadows. But I have to ask, was this level of elaborate hiding just exhausting for him? Or was it just, the accepted cost of doing business in his era?
Well, using your analogy of the fortress, his power, his financial means, and his sheer style allowed him to effectively cover his tracks. Discretion was a literal currency in the upper echelons of society back then.
Right. But how did that actually work in practice? I mean, how do you maintain that level of secrecy when you are one of the most famous men in the world and you're constantly surrounded by people?
You compartmentalize. And you use your wealth as a physical barrier.
Meaning he bought privacy.
Yes. He relied on an army of well-paid, highly loyal staff who knew everything and said absolutely nothing. Plus, he maintained multiple sprawling, luxurious residences across the globe.
Paris, Venice, New York.
Right, in Hollywood. So if a situation became too heated or too public in one city, he could simply board an ocean liner and vanish to another continent. Furthermore, he was surrounded by a circle of aristocratic peers who implicitly understood the unspoken rules of their class.
They all knew the game.
Exactly. You don't talk to the press, you don't cause a public scandal, and you ruthlessly protect your own.
The wealth wasn't just for buying nice things then, it was for buying the literal space to exist safely.
Right.
For you listening, just imagine the psychological weight of that. You have this towering public empire you've built, the Broadway shows, the adoring fans, the society pages singing your praises.
And then you have your actual human heart.
Yeah. Knowing that one slip of the tongue, one misplaced photograph, or just one saved piece in paper that falls into the wrong hands could instantly incinerate your entire life. It's terrifying.
It required a level of emotional discipline that Porter usually managed flawlessly. He was the undisputed king of indirection.
But there was a moment when that perfectly curated facade was nearly shattered, wasn't there? By one man.
Yes. And this brings us to what is undoubtedly the most intense emotional chapter of Cole Porter's life.
We have to talk about Boris Kokno.
Yes, we do.
If Cole Porter's life is a highly controlled stage play, this is the act where the cool, collected protagonist completely loses the script.
To set the scene for this, we are in mid-1920s Paris and Venice. Boris Kokno was a young, brilliant Russian poet, but more importantly, he was a central figure in the orbit of Sergei Diaghilev and the Ballet Russes.
Okay, and for context, the Ballet Russes wasn't just a dance company.
Oh, no, not at all. It was the absolute epicenter of the European avant-garde. It brought together the greatest modernist painters, composers, and dancers of the era.
So a very vibrant, intense environment?
Extremely. It was a space of incredible artistic and sexual freedom. Highly bohemian and deeply alluring to someone like Porter, who was drawn to both the genius and the intoxicating atmosphere.
And the sources all seem to agree on this next point. This was the single most emotionally intense male relationship of Cole Porter's entire life.
Without a doubt.
This is the only time he fell, unequivocally and desperately, in love.
And when we examine the surviving letters from Porter to Kokno, you can witness that desperation unfolding in real time.
It's palpable.
It really is. The tone shifts dramatically. If we trace the correspondence chronologically, the early letters are purely practical.
What do they say?
Well, Porter writes to Kokno about logistics, saying things like he needs to see him to take care of the checks for the dancers, and casually adding, Linda and I would like all of you to dine with us.
Okay, so very formal. It's the wealthy American patron speaking to the artistic coordinator.
Yeah.
It's polite, it's transactional, safely distant.
Right, but then the floor completely drops out.
Oh man, does it ever. That polite distance evaporates into total emotional nakedness.
Yeah.
Porter suddenly writes, even before daring to tell you the truth, before I'd met you, I always wanted to chase away everybody there and must announce to you that I adored you.
It's so intense.
And then he follows that with, I want you in my arms right now, in my arms for always. I mean, he is completely unguarded.
It's shocking, honestly.
It's like finding out James Bond cries at rom-coms.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, because his public brand was utterly cool and half-armored. He also writes, oh, Boris, how you have complicated my life. And then, how it makes me happy, darling. These letters are needy, they're destabilized, and bordering on obsessed.
What's fascinating here is the contrast between the public persona and the private man. It's just jarring. Think of songs like, Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love.
Right, very clever.
Very clever, biological, sort of above it all. But this isn't the witty sophisticate at the piano. This is a man who is actively drowning in a consuming passion.
Wait, but there is a fascinating power dynamic here that we should highlight. Porter is the one funding the Ballet Russes, right?
He is.
He is depositing money for Kokno, arranging the grand dinners, financially supporting the entire artistic enterprise. He holds all the material power.
Yeah.
But emotionally, he's the one begging in these letters.
And that material entanglement made the relationship incredibly volatile. He was weaving his romantic life into his financial patronage. He was the benefactor, but he was emotionally subjugated by his own desire.
Which had to be terrifying for someone who loved control.
Exactly. And because Kokno was immersed in this chaotic, dramatic, highly promiscuous bohemian world of the Ballet Russes, Porter was constantly kept off balance.
And this is where the life bleeds directly into the art in a way that just gives me chills.
Yes, the music.
The historical analysis explicitly draws a straight line from this specific anguish over Cockno to one of Porter's absolute greatest masterpieces. What is this thing called love?
Yes.
The sources link those raw, throbbing rhythms directly to his feelings for Cockno during this era. The letters themselves are practically the prose version of that song.
What is this thing called love? Isn't a song about the joy of romance.
None at all.
It's a song about being victimized by an emotion you cannot control. The lyric asks why the Lord above would allow this thing to make a fool of him.
Make a fool of him, right. That is the voice of a man who has always been in control, suddenly finding himself entirely powerless.
We also see lyrical inspiration in another song about someone sad, meaning someone bad, but the kind of bad that's sweet.
Which is universally believed to be launched directly by this infatuation with Cockno. He is literally channeling his private agony into the Great American Songbook.
He had to. That translation was necessary because the affair itself was ultimately doomed.
Yeah, it was too intense to last.
It collapsed under the weight of several immense pressures. First, the geography. They were constantly traveling across Europe for different seasons and performances.
Right.
Second, the archive reveals that Cockno was not exclusively devoted to Porter. There's a note indicating Cockno was simultaneously involved with an American socialite named Herman Ulrichs Jr.
Ouch.
Yeah. But the ultimate catalyst for the collapse of the romance was a sudden, severe crisis with Porter's wife, Linda.
Right, the domestic reality crashes in.
Mm.
Porter actually writes to Cockno in a panic. He states that Linda's condition is very serious and that the doctor is insisting he leave for the States immediately.
Just dropping everything.
Yeah. He tells Cockno, "I won't see you again before I leave. Don't be furious. Believe me when I tell you that I love you more than ever." He literally flees the continent because the domestic situation has become utterly untenable.
It forced his hand.
It did. And the mention of Linda's crisis naturally raises the biggest question of Porter's domestic life. What exactly did his wife know?
That is the big question. Linda Lee Thomas is a fascinating historical figure in her own right.
She really is.
She was a deeply cultured, incredibly wealthy divorcee. She was older than Cole and considered one of the great beauties of Europe. But her understanding of her husband's life is a subject of major historical debate.
Because the sources offer these seemingly contradictory views.
Exactly. Some accounts suggest she realized Porter was gay upon their very first meeting, and that she accepted it on the strict condition that he maintain a minimal facade.
Right. Which paints her as this worldly, highly pragmatic, progressive partner who entered into a marriage of minds. She knew the score. But then you have other accounts from their contemporaries, like the photographer Horst, who describe Linda as very naive.
Yes.
And when the intensity of the Cockno affair became apparent in Venice, she reportedly took it extremely hard, resulting in this severe physical and emotional breakdown. So I have to ask you, which is it?
It's tricky.
Was she a worldly, progressive partner who knew the score, or was she completely in the dark and naive?
Well, the historical consensus elegantly reconciles these sources by looking at the specific boundaries of their arrangement. Linda was not naive to the reality of the world. Her first marriage to Edward Thomas was famously abusive and traumatic.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So what she sought with Cole Porter was a safe, brilliant, culturally rich companionship. She almost certainly understood the broad outline of his sexuality and accepted the concept of it in the abstract.
In the abstract being the key phrase there.
Precisely. What she could not tolerate was the messy, concrete reality intruding on her domain, especially when an affair became emotionally serious, socially visible, or threatened her role as his primary companion.
That makes perfect sense. We see this tension play out in real time during the Venice era. During the Cockno affair, Porter was incredibly relieved when Cockno actually managed to charm Linda at a social gathering.
Right, he was thrilled.
He writes, that makes everything so much easier. He was actively trying to integrate his lover into his domestic social fabric to, smooth over the tension.
But he fundamentally misunderstood her boundaries. He thought if everyone was polite and civilized, the arrangement could hold.
But Linda's severe distress forced Porter to leave for the States. It proved otherwise.
The unwritten contract of their marriage was basically, I will look the other way, provide you with unquestioning support and social cover as long as you do not embarrass me and as long as I remain the most important person in your life.
And the Cocknose situation violated both clauses. For you listening, consider the emotional tightrope of this marriage. It's a partnership built on genuine love and mutual protection, no doubt about that. But it's strictly bound by these unspoken rules about looking the other way.
It's a very fragile balance.
It is. And the Cockno affair proved that Europe, despite all its artistic freedom, was getting way too complicated and too painful for Linda.
So they had to reset.
Yeah. But when the Porters shifted their gaze to America's West Coast, the rules of the game changed completely.
They absolutely did. The move into the California sun, the Hollywood era, marks a distinct, bold shift in how Porter operated.
Okay, let's talk about Hollywood.
Now, to be clear, California didn't invent Porter's same-sex life.
Of course not.
But what the Hollywood ecosystem did was strip away a massive layer of that European aristocratic discretion.
Right, and this bright, bold era introduces us to a man named Ed Touch. If Cockno was the grand, tragic European romance, Ed Touch represents this sun-drenched, unapologetic Hollywood chapter.
Yes. We have records of a walking trip through Europe that Porter took with Ed Touch and the filmmaker Preston Sturges.
And this trip shows a totally different Porter.
A very bold new Cole Porter. He is surrounded by what historians describe as handsome guides and attractive bellboys, exploring ancient statues of male nudes.
Right, his gaze is no longer hiding behind a polite fan. It is increasingly and openly organized around his homoerotic preferences. He felt a sense of liberation.
And just like with Cockno, this intense connection with Ed Touch bleeds directly into the musical blueprint of his career.
Which song this time?
Well, the historical analysis explicitly links Touch to one of the most hauntingly beautiful things Porter ever wrote, In the Still of the Night.
Oh, wow.
When you analyze the structure of In the Still of the Night through the lens of Ed Touch, the song structure perfectly mirrors the relationship.
It really does, because it's a song entirely about uncertainty. It's not this triumphant declaration of love. It is about desperate yearning and this paralyzing, creeping fear that the dream is going to, as the lyric says, fade out of sight.
Exactly.
It is a song about grasping at something fleeting in the dark, wondering if the person you love even remembers you exist once they leave your side.
And that fleeting, increasingly bold lifestyle had severe consequences back home, because this California boldness was the ultimate violation of Linda's carefully maintained boundaries.
Right, the increasing boldness of Cole's homosexual caperings in Hollywood, as the accounts note.
Yeah.
He was surrounding himself with a dense network of gay men, and it was just too much for Linda. She felt she was losing his companionship entirely.
She felt replaced by a lifestyle.
Exactly, and so she hit her breaking point. She fled to Paris, which resulted in a very sharp, very painful estrangement between the two of them.
The Hollywood era tested the marriage in ways Europe never did, simply because the discretion had evaporated. But as we move through the timeline, as Porter grew older and the world plunged into the Second World War, the frantic, bold energy of those early Hollywood years morphed into something softer.
Something different.
Yes, yet surprisingly volatile. This brings us to the wartime triangles.
Okay, let's get into the WWII era. We have to look at his relationships during this time, specifically with a young serviceman named Nelson Barclift.
Right. When we look at Porter's letters to Barclift during WWII, there is a distinct shift in tone.
How so?
If the letters to Boris Cockno were all about ecstatic anguish, the editors of his correspondence described the letters to Barclift as being earnest and paternal. It's a far cry from the Cockno era.
Paternal makes sense, though. I mean, we really see this incredible sense of domesticity in this era. He actually had a designated Barclift room in his Brentwood house.
He was building a sanctuary.
He really was. And once again, the sources connect this era to a specific song, Sing to Me, Guitar. The lyrics are deeply poignant for wartime separation. The lines go, his lips pressed to mine as we kissed and we kissed. It's a very beautiful, protective sentiment.
It is.
You read this and you think, okay, Cole has finally found a stable, quiet love to sustain him through the global conflict.
But
Just as you, the listener, settle into that comfortable paternal narrative, the history throws a massive curveball.
It really does.
Because while he's pining for Barcliff, Porter abruptly writes a letter announcing something completely new. He tells his friends that he has a new boyfriend.
A new boyfriend.
A strapping marine beauty from Montana called Bob Bray.
Yes, Bob Bray.
And he playfully tells his friends about this using a hilarious moniker for himself. He calls himself the Duchess of Peru.
The Duchess of Peru.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant flash of camp humor, but it's also incredibly revealing about his state of mind. He's speaking so openly in private correspondence about his shifting desires.
And Bob Bray was not just a passing fancy.
No, he wasn't. We have to unpack the phrase used by Jean Howard, who was a prominent socialite in their inner circle. She referred to Bob Bray as Cole Porter's last great love.
Last great love. Wow.
Yes, but what is truly fascinating here is the messy Californian triangulation of this era.
Oh, the love triangle. This is wild.
Yeah, because Bob Bray wasn't just Cole Porter's lover. The historical accounts note that Bray was reportedly a lover of Nelson Barcliff's as well.
Wait, really? Both of them?
Yes, and all of them, Porter, Barcliff, and Bray, would casually gather and have lunch together at Porter's Brentwood home.
That is just extraordinary. You have the aging composer, the earnest serviceman, and the strapping marine from Montana, all navigating this overlapping romantic web by the pool.
It's very California.
It is. It was less of a grand European tragedy like with Cockno, and more of an improvised, overlapping domestic arrangement.
Much looser, much more communal.
Yeah. So these intense named affairs, Cockno, Touch, Barcliff, Bray, they were the major tentpoles of his romantic life. But there was an entire cast of other characters operating in a much murkier space.
Yes, the gray area. We have to talk about the companions, the codes, and the risk of exposure.
Let's talk about the borderland men. These are figures like Hutch, Monty Woolley, and Charles Greenshaw.
Right, let's touch on Hutch first. Leslie Hutchinson, known as Hutch. His liaisons with a succession of celebrities, which included Cole Porter, are categorized by the sources as physical, transitory connections.
Right.
Rather than a grand romance. In fact, that specific transactional underworld of the cabaret scene inspired the song, I'm a Gigolo.
Ah, okay. So that was a physical intersection in a very fast-moving world. But then contract that with his relationships with men like Charles Greenshaw and Monty Woolley.
Very different.
Completely different. The surviving letters to these two men are flirtatious, highly comic, full of camp and cruising. I mean, Porter writes to Shaw and mocks him, writing, "The big boy doesn't write to me."
It's great banter.
It really is. The tone shifts entirely. This isn't tragic romance. This is fun, intimate banter between kindred spirits. But I have to ask, were they actually lovers or just wingmen?
The editorial consensus on the correspondence draws a careful distinction here. They point out that there is little evidence that they were lovers, except perhaps occasionally.
Okay, so more platonic.
Yeah, they functioned much more as sparring partners for cruises around New York's waterfront bars and bordellos.
Sparring partners, I like that. But leaning on someone like Monty Woolley for companionship brings up a massive critical vulnerability.
It does.
Because Porter relied on a code of class discretion, but Monty Woolley was famously less discreet. He lived loudly.
And that explores how fragile Porter's secret really was.
Yeah.
He was relying entirely on the silence of men who lived much louder lives than he did. Monty Woolley was a liability because he constantly threatened to bring the noise of the underground into Porter's hushed drawing rooms.
So if he couldn't speak his truth publicly and his friends were a constant liability, where did all of this repressed emotion go?
It went into the music, the final translation.
Exactly. Life into art.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and explicitly summarize the thesis of the source material,
Yeah.
Cole Porter was not just a practiced libertine hiding behind champagne wit.
Not at all.
The mystery of Cole Porter isn't whether he loved men. The archive proves that he did. The mystery is how much of that love he could afford to show and how much he was forced to translate into song.
When you reflect on the specific links we've discussed today, it is staggering. Boris Cockno's agonizing distance becoming the throbbing pulse of what is this thing called love?
Right.
Ed Touch's fleeting presence becoming the desperate fear in the still of the night. Nelson Barcliff's wartime absence becoming the pleading separation of sing to me, guitar.
It's all there.
The longing in these songs wasn't a theatrical invention. It was lived, bruised reality.
Acts of emotional survival.
Exactly. And I want to say this directly to you, the listener. Understanding this hidden history fundamentally changes how you hear Cole Porter's catalog.
It really does.
The next time you listen to these songs, they are no longer just clever rhymes. They are acts of emotional survival and coded confessions.
And that leaves us with one final, provocative thought to ponder that builds on the text.
What's that?
If the vast majority of Porter's love letters hadn't been purposefully destroyed to protect his reputation,
Yeah.
would he be remembered today primarily as a witty sophisticate? Or would he be recognized as one of the great, tragic, romantic poets of the 20th century?
Wow. That completely reframes his legacy, and that is the perfect place to leave it for today.
Thank you so much for joining us for episode 56 of the podcast called Porter-Pedia. We hope this exploration of the sources has given you a whole new appreciation for the man behind the music. Keep listening to those lyrics, keep looking for the hidden truth, and we will see you next time.